Welcome to Starting Nowhere. I'm your host, Brandon. Do me a favor and click like and subscribe so you can see more Starting Nowhere. Today, my guest is Chris Medina. Chris is the founder of the National HBCU Speech and Debate Association and the former leader of the debate team at Wiley College, which was made famous by Denzel Washington in The Great Debaters. Today, we'll talk about why Chris believes debate is such an important skill to have and why it should be involved in more programs, the state of our education system and how we fix it, and lastly, what it was like to work with Denzel Washington and what the relationship is today. Please enjoy today's episode. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. I'm very excited for this episode. I've been looking forward to it all week. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you came to be unfortunate enough to meet me.
Hey, Brandon, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I have such respect for people who do podcasts. It's really, it's truly an art. It's amazing. So, good for you. So I'm Dr. Christopher Medina. Most people call me Coach or they call me Chris, your choice. I guess a little bit about my background. I've done a lot, but I've been involved in competitive speech and debate for 34-ish years now. I started when I was in high school and I started coaching right out of high school. I guess my claim to fame is that for 7 years, I was the head coach of the Great Debaters. If you've seen the movie with Denzel Washington, that was my team for 7 years. And during that time, we were able to mold them into the most successful HBCU speech and debate team in history. Since then, I went on, got a PhD in leadership. And right now I work at Prairie View A&M University as a lecturer. And I founded and am the executive director of the National HBCU Speech and Debate Association. And what we do there is we help to build and foster speech and debate teams at HBCUs. So I do a couple of things.
A few. I'm glad that you were able to stretch that out to make enough time here. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So let's start with the obvious question because I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure it's like, so you're not the character Denzel Washington was playing, correct?
No.
Okay.
Melvin Tolson was a real person. Melvin Tolson he started the debate team in 1925 and coached it through 1938. And so the entire movie was true in that respect. There are some truth and there are some, creative licensing within the movie. So James Farmer Jr., absolutely real. He actually went on to form the Congress on Racial Equality. Mm-hmm. He was a racial advocate. He was one of the architects of the March on Washington. And he was actually the individual that created affirmative action in the Johnson administration. Funny enough, actually, his wife was born in Marshall, and I believe that LBJ, had some connection to Marshall, or his wife had a connection to Marshall. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where they had some common ground. But in any case, yeah. So Melvin B. Tolson was a real person.
And again, that was just to show how excited I was when we first connected and you kind of were sharing your story and stuff like that. I was like, oh, this is it. And here's why I'm the smartest dumb person a lot of people know. One, as you said, that would make you like 100 years old.
Right. Yeah. No, I wish I was as successful or renowned as Melvin B. Tolson.
Yeah. So that's just nonsensical, but it's still a very exciting thing, obviously. And it's a very cool story that came from that. And debate in general is something I've been interested in since I was young, even though I never did it. I just never happened to have a school that had a debate team or reached out to go find a debate team that was like local, not affiliated with a school or anything like that. So it's always been something I've been interested in. But tell me something that you see often that people get wrong about debating, that they either have seen on a TV or they just believe about it naturally.
Yeah. So first, it's a shame that your school never had it, because to be quite honest, debate saved my life. And it's probably saved the lives of about 80 to 90% of the students that I coach. Because it's so powerful and has, such an impact on individuals and their ability to build skills and transferable skills. So it's a real shame that your school didn't have a debate program, because I think that it can help so many students. That's why I'm a big advocate of debate programs, and debate across the curriculum, which is something that's relatively new. But as far as what people get wrong, in terms of debate in the movies and that sort of thing, My dad actually tells me, so you get paid to teach people to bullshit. Um, and that's not exactly the case. I look at debate more like a martial art, that, it should be used in defense and not in aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think that if you have debate training that, you're naturally aggressive and will try to provoke argument because you can win, or think that you can win. But another thing that people get wrong is debate is so much more than just a one-on-one, two-on-two like you've seen in the movies. A lot of people think about the presidential debate, which is very, very different from an academic debate.
Mm-hmm.
But also, a lot of people don't understand that speech and debate competition is really like track. So you have a lot of different events. In track, you have the hurdles and the 400-yard dash and 100 and all that. Same thing with debate. And so we do, the argumentation stuff, but we also have public speaking events where people inform or persuade. But we also have a whole genre of events that most people know nothing about. So what we do is we actually create argument with literature and then act out the literature. So that it's amazing. So people can actually feel on an emotional level, this argument that they understand on an intellectual level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really profound. Actually, one of my students made Denzel Washington cry.
That's a beautiful thing. And you're making me now revisit, excuse me, my childhood in a much less positive light, because I was in theater. I also enjoyed the concept of debating and just challenging people's beliefs, my own included, and things like that, and have a love for words and everything. So it does sound like, had I grown up somewhere where there's a debate team, I would have probably dedicated my life to it. It probably would have been exactly what I would have done.
Absolutely. And it's amazing because actually, when I started in speech and debate in high school, it actually encouraged me to go on to acting school. So I did acting school for a couple of years, and, I didn't go into acting. I wanted to eat. So, I decided, let me do some of this coaching thing, let me make a little bit of money. But, it really is so much more than people realize. And it is really so profound. Yeah, it's incredible.
That's outstanding. Well, I'm very thankful for people like yourself. Let me start there, because the people who give that kind of energy back to the world, I think, inherently make it a better place. Because too often we judge people by the successes of those that they've coached or something like that. It's not that. It's what they could have been without that coaching. And I think that you're very, very good at doing that. Obviously, that's why you've been esteemed in this field for as long as you have, and at the the institutes that you have and everything. And that's awesome. So let me give you your flowers, as they say, while you're sitting here, because I think that we're too hesitant to do that these days. People like yourself have value. You are amazing in a lot of people's eyes. Just because I don't know who you are from like Instagram or TV or whatever does not somehow diminish the value of what you've done and the impact you've had on this world. So, and as you said, one of your students made Denzel Washington cry. So that to me already tells me that you have power in what you do,
Well, I appreciate that. I tell people all the time that this is more of a calling than it is a job, because it is something that is so profound. And working with these students and seeing them grow and become, such powerful and incredible advocates in their own lives is life-changing.
That's outstanding. And again, so you touched on some other things there that I thought were very interesting and just serendipitous in the way that you and I may connect on some themes. Is that I consider myself a martial artist. I've practiced martial arts now for the past, like, off and on, a lot of off, unfortunately,
Nice.
for the past decade or so, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, those type of things, whatever. So when you're talking about the martial art mindset and the way that you use it for defense instead of offense, it goes back to one of the things I've always said. Only the person who can defend themselves can be a pacifist, because you're making an active choice. I can't make an active choice to not do something I am not capable of doing. And it's the same thing you're talking about with debating and everything like that. You're not being aggressive with debating. It's a skill that you get to determine how you use once you have it. If you don't have it, you're not choosing to use it. You just can't do it. And so I think that's an amazing point to make, that it's not meant to go out and start arguments because you can defeat people that way. a person who does that already has the wrong mindset and probably wouldn't be that good at debating anyways because they're in it for the wrong reasons. Same thing with
Right.
martial arts. If you're in there
Right.
to learn how to beat people up, it's probably not going to be the place for you because the discipline of it and everything else will weed that out.
Exactly. And in actuality, it's probably one of the reasons why I've done a lot of work in civil discourse, but also one of the reasons why we have so much contention within our society today, because not enough students are learning these skills in terms of debate and being able to express themselves. In actuality, there are studies that are done that discuss the power of debate, and one of the reasons it's powerful, and it actually helps students to have fewer incidents at schools, at-risk students and so forth, because they learn how to be able to express themselves, express their angers, express their fears, express what's happening in their lives, and they don't have to resort to violence or contentiousness. So a lot of what we're seeing in our society right now with, civil unrest or uncivil unrest is, a direct reflection upon our abandonment of, critical education within our society.
And so what you said there, I'd like to pull it back a few steps and we can pivot, go back forward into where we're at now with the, as you said, uncivil or unrest. Do you think that starts from the conversations we're unable to have in a clear manner because we did not develop the skills to either have those skills in civil places or because we just were told to avoid them? We were not able to deal with the emotion that surrounds those topics. And then that became part of it. So do you think, peeling it back 10 years, let's say, if we were able to teach the generation who is now doing these uncivil unrest things, which really is probably my generation or even yours, if we were able to teach them how to talk about these things, do you believe that we'd be a lot better at civil discourse, but also just better at dealing with these topics that cause so much frustration with people?
Absolutely. And actually, I'm going to go over, a few different things and you tell me when to shut up.
Okay.
But the first thing is that I don't think that people truly have a reason for what it is that they're discussing, right? So in our society right now, people try to prove themselves right? Mm-hmm. We get that adrenaline high by proving that, we're superior or we're right. So rather than having a goal or an aim of the conversation of, I just want to learn, I just want to exchange ideas, it's about winning and losing, right? So people are fighting to the death in terms of their beliefs. A second problem is that we become so siloed within our thoughts, right? Especially through social media, because we create echo chambers within our social media that people only reflect what it is that we believe. Then those thoughts are so ingrained that we then don't become open to any other ideologies. And that becomes, a problem. So I think that the next problem is that, people try to, unfortunately nowadays what's happening is people are feeling something and then go out in the media to try to prove it, rather than analyzing everything that is happening, all the news or all the information sources that they can get their hands on, and then try to, draw some conclusions from that. So right now what's happening is people are feeling some type of way and then go out and prove that feeling, which makes them feel it even stronger. So right now we're ruled by emotions and not by logic. So yes, I think that if we had learned that earlier, I think that we could have stemmed a lot of what's going on now.
And I 100% agree. I think we're in a lot of situations where the cart's leading the horse. And what I mean by that is, to your point, I feel X. Let me find the set of information that proves X. Not the
Correct.
set of information that tells me whether or not X is correct, but the set of information that proves what I already feel, that confirmation bias that we have. And I think that is one of the problems that leads us to where we are now, because as you said before, you're not actually trying to get the truth. You're trying to get your truth. You're trying to make yourself feel better. You're going for those sorry, I always forget what it is, but those adrenaline hits when you're right about things. We love that, and we get so addicted to that we fear being wrong, and then we never go to a place where we might be wrong. We never get to that place.
Exactly. And you actually stumbled on something when you talk about truth. It's not your truth or my truth. There's just truth.
Exactly.
So what's happening is people are creating their own truths, right? They're creating their own realities and justifying those realities rather than seeking the truth. and they're not using logic to do it, right? So, I'm not going to talk about who's right and who's wrong and what's going on in society, but my point is that individuals are not using logical conclusions to, come upon, their ideologies. And so because of that, their emotions are ruling the day, and we wonder why there's so much chaos going on in society right now.
Absolutely. And I think until we get better at dealing with those base emotions and those base feelings that we're having, I don't think we're ever going to get down the line to where we're better at the civil unrest, uncivil unrest, all those different type of things. I think we have to deal with the root cause, if you will, to do a root cause analysis and stop treating symptoms.
Actually, I think that one of the even more root causes has to do with like Maslow's hierarchy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy.
I am, but go ahead and break it down for me, please.
Okay. So Maslow was a psychologist in the 1950s, and he said that, there are certain things that you need to be a fulfilled human being. And at the base level, you need housing, shelter, food. At the next level, you need belonging and camaraderie, family, that sort of thing. And each step is something else until you become a fully actualized individual, right? Basically, live up to your expectations, so forth. Anyway, I think that that Maslow has stumbled onto something, right? So those individuals who believe a certain way surround themselves with others who believe that same thing and give them the belonging that Maslow was talking about, right? So not only are they, feeling a certain way, but they actually have community and a camaraderie based around that feeling, which satisfies those needs that Maslow was talking about.
Yeah. And to try to illustrate this for people who may be a little bit lost in the definition of that, that's similar to when you see an alcoholic suddenly become sober and they no longer can have the same friend groups because their definition of who they were in that friend group no longer makes sense. So when you define yourself by something in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you build yourself around that friend group, that's why it can be so hard to pull them out of there. You see, again, to go to the extremes, to not to accuse anyone or anything of this. I'm just going to an extreme to illustrate the purpose. This is why it's hard to pull people out of cults. That is their self-definition. And it's hard for them to get out of that. And so it's the same thing when you see the echo chambers and everything else you're talking about. We've built so much comfort around it that we don't know who we are without it.
Yeah, and that's why we actually have so many fringe groups, right? Because they create that community and that caring. So that's why you have, the KKK. That's why you have all these hate groups and so forth that are all battling one another because they've created this community where everyone thinks alike and they feed off of that with one another.
Absolutely. And I think what you're talking about, going back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is, as you said, belonging is a major one of them. And one of the ones I always attach groupthink or I don't know why I said that. Not groupthink, but being in a group to the security need, because we feel safer when we're part of a group. We constantly look at something like a gazelle or antelope or something like that. When one of them breaks off, the lion attacks them, they're killed. And we don't feel literally that way in society, but we do look at people who go outside what we think our bounds are, and we do treat them that way. We try to pull them back into the group, pull them back into security for multiple reasons, and one of them being that we think they're being unsafe, and they could either harm themselves or potentially tear down our own vision of what we are as people.
Well, not only that, when you discuss something with somebody and they challenge your ideology, not only are they tearing you down, but they're tearing down your entire community that you've built up, right? So they challenge that idea of, your entire being and your entire ecosystem. So, they're going to fight to the death in order to try to protect that reality that they've created. So it's no wonder that individuals are where they are. But debate allows individuals to challenge those ideologies, to look at things from multiple perspectives. I have a lot of friends and even family members that have a different political ideology than I do. And most of the time I can get along with them. I really practice that civil discourse. There are some times where we have to stop and say, you know what? We're not going to agree on this, and we're not making headway. We're not educating one another. So there's really no point in this conversation. Let's move on. Let's talk about something else. It doesn't change who we are as people or how we feel about one another. It just means that we think differently. And, so I think that if we were able to teach people that a lot more, then we wouldn't have the physical altercations that are going on in society.
And tell me if you feel differently in this, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like to me, with things like debate or anything that challenges your framework of who you are or what you believe in, those type of things, that it allows you to kind of choose who you are instead of just feeling like you fell into a position. You know what I mean? Because I can have my own views of my ideology challenged, then I also feel more comfortable in that ideology because I'm not being exposed. I'm not hiding myself away from somebody revealing something that's going to make me change the way I think about myself. I'm just choosing to believe what I believe. I'm making
Yeah.
an active choice to do that.
Yeah, you're making an active choice after analyzing all of the possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it even stronger. Because I can see things from multiple perspectives, I've looked at it from multiple perspectives and I've challenged what I believe to be true and what isn't. So because I've done all of that work, I've arrived at a conclusion that is right for myself, right? And I choose to accept that conclusion. Absolutely, it's a choice, but it's also a choice that's arrived at after all of the work has been done to analyze the position.
Absolutely. And I could, like I said, I think it's important that we look at things that way because as I've always tried to tell people, whether you're actively making a choice or passively making a choice, you are making a choice and you have to be comfortable with who you're choosing to be at any given time. And then, like I said, we all have our blind spots. We all have things that we believe that may be nonsensical. But if you came and challenged me right now on my favorite type of pizza, probably okay. If you come and
Right.
challenge me on certain other pieces of my ideology that I hold so dear to me, now we may have to fist fight. You know what I mean? And that's
Right.
where you have to continue to challenge your own idea of what defines you as a person and how okay you are with other people not understanding it.
And the worst part is that that is actually transferring into our entire education system,
Hmm.
right? Because our education system is geared at teaching kids what to think rather than how to think, then we're losing all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our education system is failing us. It just is. You look at the studies that show that critical thinking is not increasing when students graduate from college. There are skills gap that exist within our society. 90% of CEOs say that there's a skills gap. Kids don't have soft skills. They can't problem solve. They can't
Mm-hmm.
think critically. They can't create relationships. They can't work in groups. There's a whole lot of problems, and that's stemming from the education system. So we have to actually rework the way that we teach students in order to prevent these things that are happening in society.
Yeah. And I don't propose to tell you your career. So anytime that I overstep my bounds as a non-educator, please feel free to push me back. But
Oh,
one
all
of the
good.
things that I've kind of thought is that we've gotten away from, as you said, teaching and educating to
Mm.
indoctrination of a way to behave, a way to think, and a way to do these things. And I don't mean that in some tinfoil hat thing and where we're trying to like control everybody. No, I mean that more so in social mores and everything like that. Instead of letting people think and reach their own conclusions and coming to their own terms with certain things, we're telling them exactly how they should feel about something. And that's causing a lot of these problems you're talking about with soft skills. Because if you don't tell me, if I don't learn how to think for myself and how to be my own person, my soft skills will diminish because as soon as I don't have enough stuff to pair it, I no longer have anything to say. I no longer have anything to contribute. And when you start working for companies as an adult, you have to have some critical thinking. You have to be able to think on your feet and those type of things. And if you've never built those skills, you're basically a kindergartner.
Right. And the thing is that, I don't mean to throw out wide sweeping generalizations because there are some really good
No, that's
teachers
my
out
job.
there.
I do that.
Yeah, there's some really good teachers out there, and they're really trying to, work hard to change this. But they're working within a system that is fundamentally broken.
Mhm.
And I say that because we've seen the evidence, right? I'm basing that not on emotion, I'm basing that on the evidence that exists. You can look at wage gaps, you can look at all of these individuals who say that these kids don't have the skills. Look at the tests. The testing shows that students are not developing these skills, which is why we have to change how it is that we teach students, which is why I've done so much work with debate across the curriculum.
And I think something you just said there is very interesting to me because it kind of feeds back into the point we were making before, where those who identify as teachers may feel attacked. We are
Right.
not attacking teachers. We are attacking
Correct.
teaching, which is not any individual person's fault. You're attacking. We're
Right.
not attacking. I shouldn't say that because we're not that aggressive right now. But
Critiquing.
thank you. That's
Critiquing.
far more accurate. See, thank you,
Yeah.
Coach. So we're looking at the way the system is. And
Right.
any individual contributor in a system can only affect so much. You yourself in your system can affect everybody who comes through your halls, but you can't affect anybody you've never touched. And so even if you're doing an amazing job in your system, but the system overall is broken, then you're not going to see that in a meaningful ripple effect or in an exponential effect, if you will. And so I think that's one of the things we're talking about. So yes, I agree with you. We're not talking about any individual teacher, because teachers, you have to almost do it as an intrinsic motivator, because it's not going to make you a ton of money. So if you're
Right.
doing it as intrinsically, you want to be good at what you're doing. You want to help the future and help these children. So it's not you that's wrong. It's the system that's supporting you. The way that you actually have to do your job that is the we're at fault here.
Which actually brings up another issue,
Yeah.
is that certain groups, are like, they say that if you don't agree with it, then get out of it. And I don't agree with that. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That you're no longer a part of that group. So,
Yeah.
I'm an educator, and I believe in educating. I just don't believe that the system is as successful as it can be.
Yeah.
So my goal isn't to leave the system, because then no change is affected. My goal is to try to help to change the system, right? Which is why I do debate across the curriculum, and debate across the curriculum. What it does is it actually is a methodology of teaching current curriculum, so that, individuals can then discuss or analyze, the things that they're being taught. And the gains that students get from this are absolutely incredible. This is what I did my dissertation on. And it's just now starting to be recognized or be understood on a larger scale, and we're hoping that it's going to take off.
Well, that's exciting. Talk more about that. What is that? The debate across the curriculum, I believe you called it.
Yeah. So when I was at Wiley, I created the first debate across the curriculum program in higher education. And so what we did is we taught every freshman coming in the fundamentals of argumentation in their freshman experience class. And then in every classification of every major across campus, we actually had debate or discussion assignments where students were, arguing the material that they were learning. And then I studied it. And the quantitative study actually demonstrates that the students in the program had the highest percentage of critical thinking growth in the country. And, the engagement was off the charts. When kids are engaged, they're going to learn. So like 82% of students on satisfaction surveys had reported that they learned more about the material because of debating it. And about the same were really satisfied or satisfied with the program, which demonstrates that engagement. And that it's been done on the secondary and elementary in a couple of districts. So Boston has a program where they do this. I'm not sure if they do it all the way across the district, but they have. I know that they, utilize this. Mm-hmm. Chicago also utilizes this, and then there are private schools that utilize this, and it's starting to gain some momentum even on the collegiate level. There are universities that are starting to look at it because there has been a fundamental shift. And if I'm going too far, you just tell me to stop.
No, but not far enough. Keep going.
There's been a fundamental shift, right, in education, especially on the community college level. There's something out there called career pathways or guided pathways. Mm-hmm. And it's really taken off. About 200 community colleges, utilize this program. And basically what it says is that we want students to be able to get jobs within their major. Mm-hmm. So let's create a pathway of classes for them to be able to then achieve that. Debate across the curriculum fits really well into those guided pathways or career pathways, because then it helps to develop those skills that they need in order to be successful when they leave and get into whatever career field that they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I think that the fundamental shift of education is beginning. It just needs to go farther. The Brookings Institute wrote a book recently. It actually is titled Resolved: Debate Can Change Education and Save Our Democracy. And it just came out in October, which, really reinforces the work that I've done. And I got in touch with the author, and he said, I've been looking for you. So we got in touch, and we've been, really talking about debate across curriculum and advocating it and so forth. And I know he's writing an article even that is advocating to the new administration coming in about creating a pilot program and seriously looking at this type of education so that it can be widely available.
And see what I think you're talking about there. It feeds into one of my own personal beliefs, and what I believe is that stop worrying about the how and worry about what you're looking for in the outcome. And so I feel that is one of the things we have failed to do in our education system, and a lot of our systems we have here in America, but the education system being the current one we're talking about, where we're looking at how we teach so often instead of what we actually want them to learn, what we want them to do, which is, again, like you said, be critical thinkers, be able to have your own life and go out there and pick a path for you instead of just parroting things and not actually learning how to think. And I think that's one of the fallacies we get into, which leads to the other part of that, where if you don't like it, get out, which is really synonymous with this is the way we've always done things. You
Right.
need to consistently be challenging how we're doing it, because the end goal is consistently changing, because the way society is consistently changing. You can't have the same education system for hundreds of years and then pretend like society has maintained the same level of output or whatever else. It's changed itself. So you have to adapt to those times. And it's not saying that teaching is broken to try to continue to evolve it.
Correct. And actually what you were talking about in terms of this is the way we've always done it is the fallacy of tradition.
Yep.
Just because we've always done it that way doesn't make it right.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, I think that, this idea that we don't really understand why we're teaching kids, we don't have a fundamental unified goal of what the education system is for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there are surveys that are given out as like, what do you think the education system is for? And there's a lot of people who say it's so the kids can get into college. It's a lot of people who say that, it is indoctrination. It's some people that say, it's for skill building. And nobody really is unified on the purpose of the education system. So if we don't understand what it's for, then how are we going to get to any kind of goal? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we have to have a fundamental understanding of why we're doing this in order to figure out how to do it.
And one of the things that I think is the most disappointing, let me start here. I'm a business major, so obviously I'm pro-capitalism, but I am also realistic in the sense that capitalism, communism, socialism, whatever ism you have needs to be monitored so that you can actually make it reach the goals you want it to, because no system is perfect in and of itself. And so when I say that, what I'm saying is what we have also created in education is a class system. So if you can afford different tutors or different schools or different things like that, you can get more critical thinking programs that teach your kids how to critical think better, is what I'm trying to say.
Correct. Which is why there's a lot of, there are private schools out there that have started to utilize debate across the curriculum. Mm-hmm. There's actually a new charter school in New Orleans that a friend of mine started that actually utilizes debate across the curriculum. So in the private and the charter sector, there is more of an abundance of this. But if you're not within those schools, like yourself, you didn't have a speech or debate program, right? Mm-hmm. So you lost out on those fundamental skills and experiences and networks that help to, further someone in their growth as an individual and as a human being. And, we need to be able to get back to that and create that for our students in order to give them the skills that they need. I'm not one of those lucky kids, right? Mm-hmm. So I grew up, in, I'd say, lower to middle class, didn't have anybody help me in terms of college, paid for all my colleging, mainly with student loans, and I still owe them, and still trying to pay them off. Yeah. So I'm not one of those who was, privileged in that respect, and we don't make it easy for everyone to be able to contribute to society. Mm-hmm. If I didn't take on those loans and push hard to make sure that I got the education that I do, then I wouldn't be an advocate for debate across the curriculum. I wouldn't have been able to help those students and coach them, to the amazing successes that they've become.
And I think that's so important, because within the class system, what you're essentially creating is levels of success, and success is often synonymous with morality in some people's eyes.
Yep.
If you're successful, it's because you're morally worthy, because you have the ethics that allowed you to get there, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. There's a lot of systems that just hinder people's ability to be successful. And I think critical thinking is a major one, because the more you can think, the more you can do, the more you're able to find your own lane, because you can't have everybody doing the same thing. I couldn't do what you do, and you may or may not be able to do what I do. And that's the thing. Because of the way we were able to find our own path, we were able to be our level of success because of that. And I think it's important to try to carry that forward for the next generations.
But not only successful for ourselves, but also contributors to society, right?
Absolutely.
And we both contribute to society in different ways. The people that we affect, the people that we help, the people that we interact with, right? And, without whatever success that we've been able to build for ourselves in our own respective worlds, we wouldn't be able to help those or affect those who are surround us.
Absolutely. And so on that topic, what led you to try to really impact the HBCU community? Because if I'm not mistaken, you've worked at, I think, at least two HBCUs, right?
Yeah.
So what led you down that path?
So, okay. So I was actually running the Kentucky High School Speech and Debate team, or Speech and Debate League, in Western Kentucky. And when I was there, my mom got really sick. And so it's like, okay, I got to go home. She was in Texas, and it's like, I got to go home. And when I was there, I was trying to figure out, okay, what's next for me? So I saw this ad for, this debate team, the great debaters. And I was like, I wasn't so drawn to it because it had a movie. I just felt like I could make a difference. So I applied for the position, went through all of it, which there's some funny stories there about the interview, which went totally wrong. It was really bad. But anyway, got the job. And then when I got there, I looked around for other HBCUs that had speech and debate teams. And there were only 5. There's 105 HBCUs out there, and there's only 5 speech and debate teams. And I said, you know what? I know the power of this. I know how it changes lives. I know what it can do for students, and we're hamstringing them by not allowing, this activity to happen within HBCUs. So I made it my mission to start building programs at different HBCUs, which is why I founded the National HBCU Speech and Debate Association. So right now we're up to about 30 HBCUs that have speech and debate teams, off and on, and we're really, really trying to grow it.
I mean, that's incredible. And obviously one of the things that I think naturally through this conversation, just to self-identify here for a second, you go down the path of trying to have the biggest impact potentially that you can, which I think is really where I value a lot of the work as well. Because yes, I can go out and I can make a difference in this community and still make a difference, but I can also go out and make a difference in all these communities and have this huge, huge ripple effect and impact, and do something that I think has a lot of value, which is what you've done. And I applaud that, first of all. But also the other thing that I was going to touch on is that you also help dispel the myth that HBCUs are 100% just black. Because they have black in the name, a lot of people assume that they go there that they don't accept anybody else, that there is no students who aren't black, and all those type of things. So obviously you help dispel that myth again. So did you what was your experience dealing with that, going into a world where you were seen as a minority, I guess? Well, I mean, you're always seen as a minority because we talked about it before, but
I am the minority. Well, it's funny because, a lot of people don't understand that, HBCU, that it's not 100%, black students. Actually, in West Virginia, there's an HBCU that's predominantly white, and not a lot of people know that. So, HBCU is a designation about where these schools started and how they started and so forth, right? So anything before, I believe it's 1963 or 64, where the school was created to educate, black students, that then got the designation of HBCU. And it's actually been really, really different. So one of the first tournaments, my first year that we went to a tournament in Kansas. And one of my students, comes from the Kansas City, Missouri area and that sort of thing. And she was able to get everyone together. Her mother was a city councilwoman, got everybody together and created this incredible homecoming for everybody, right? We got the key to the city. We had senators there, state senators there, and all that sort of thing. And it was fantastic. And then it was funny because she would introduce me to people and be like, here's Coach Medina. He's coach of the great debaters. And they'd look at me and be like, oh, you're not black. It was kind of awkward.
Yeah.
So I spent a little time on my own, at that event. But yeah, it's been really, really different, actually. There was a coach one time I was talking to who's a white coach. He coaches at an HBCU, and he was talking to me and he says, do you think that it's a problem that I'm not black and I'm coaching at an HBCU? And I said, absolutely not. As long as you're respecting the students, right? I didn't go to Wiley because, I had this white savior thing. No, I just went to coach some kids and then saw what was happening and then wanted to make a change. I didn't go in because I wanted to save people. I'm trying to, change what's around me because of what exists. But he asked me, he said, do you think it's a problem? And I'm like, no, as long as you respect people. And he's like, well, you know what it is, right? You know what I mean. And I'm like, no, I'm not white. I'm Latino. I'm light skinned, but I'm Latino. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not that big a deal. I think that there's such a debate going on with HBCU versus predominantly white institution and, that sort of thing. And I think that those debates, really hinder, the growth of a lot of students who choose to go to HBCUs. They choose to go there not because they want to isolate themselves, but because they want to feel comfortable. A lot of my students, that I've coached in the past have not felt, themselves or not felt the ability to be themselves in spaces that are not predominantly black. So actually these students are choosing HBCUs to be able to allow themselves the freedom to be who they are.
And I think one of the things that's happened in recent, very, very recent times is the HBCUs are starting to see some good momentum of equality. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people said if you went to an HBCU, you're hampering your future when you could go to an Ivy League or something to that effect, right? But the incoming vice president, HBCU grad. Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, HBCU grad. And again, not political affiliation and everything aside, that's not the point of what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you can reach the VP, arguably the second most powerful person in the freest country in the world, then HBCUs are probably okay. Not only are they okay, they can be a great foundation to do some really great things. So do not choose them because of that. And you're starting to see this now in one of what I think is going to be a huge impact. College basketball, college football players, they're starting to choose HBCUs as well. So you're seeing some really good momentum for HBCUs in the past couple of years. And I'm very excited about that because I'll admit I didn't go to HBCU. I also got my degree like 5-6 years ago. So it wasn't like I went to a traditional college experience nonetheless. But my point is, I think that would have been a very powerful thing at that time in my life, very formative for me and helped me in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of value in that for a lot of people.
I think it's a huge value, but I also think that there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of successful people that came out of HBCUs.
Absolutely.
In actuality, I'm going to brag a little bit because not only is Kamala Harris, an HBCU graduate, but she actually was a debater at Howard.
Oh, of course she was. That makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Actually, and who was also a debater, actually competing in different types of events, but we classify them as debaters, speech and debate competitor, was Chadwick Boseman. He was a competitor in high school as well as competitor at Howard, I'm given to understand. And I think that one of the myths that about HBCUs is what you just said, is that now there are successful people that are coming out of HBCUs, when in actuality, it's been that way for decades and generations, because HBCUs graduate, the vast majority of Black medical doctors. I forget what the percentage is, but I know it's really, really high, and a lot of the individuals who come out with graduate degrees, a lot of the Black Americans that come out with graduate degrees, most of them are from HBCUs and are doing amazing things within society. So I think that they've always been there, individuals graduating, HBCU alum, but they haven't been in the spotlight. That's the difference, right?
And I think that's the
now
point you're touching on. And I think that's the point you're touching on that really holds a lot of value when you look at things. Like, let's just go down that road, right? Jackie Robinson wasn't the first great black baseball player. He was just the first one that got the spotlight. Barack Obama, any of the first black anything, or first Latino, first woman, whatever your different thing is, they're not the first. They're the first ones that were allowed through. And that's the point. So the HBCU has been doing good work since their inception. It's whether or not society at large recognize them. And that's why I'm hopeful that with these renewed momentum for them, that people really can start to see that, and that it becomes a viable option for a lot of people instead of I don't want to say a second tier choice, but they do see it as something to aspire to.
Yeah, actually, and on your point, in terms of people who were not the first, like Rosa Parks was not the first to not give up her seat on a bus.
Yep.
She was the first one that was recognized for it, and and that recognition was essential and is necessary. But in terms of HBCUs, I think that there are a lot of students out there that would choose HBCUs if they had the same opportunities at other schools. So HBCUs are severely underfunded, right?
Yep.
They can't give out the same types of scholarships. Now, a lot of them, tuition is not nearly what they are in other schools, but they're still so severely underfunded that they can't afford to give a lot of scholarships. So therefore, some students who want to go to HBCUs can't, because it's like, I got to pay, $15,000, $20,000 to go to this HBCU over here, but I'm also getting a scholarship over here for a lot more. I got to pay less. I'm going to go there, and especially there's been a momentum, and a real push for diversity at some of these, what we call PWIs, predominantly white institutions.
Yeah.
So that diversity has been coming through scholarship, they're trying to pay for the diversity. So, students have to do, a cost benefit analysis. Yes, I want, the cultural experience that I would get at an HBCU and the education, or I can go get an education and have a lot less student debt. And students are having to make that choice, which is unfortunate because we don't fund HBCUs the way that we should.
Yeah, and the entire student loan situation is broken a million different ways, and that's just one of the many ramifications of that. And so I hadn't even considered that at that was one of the reasons as well. So that's incredibly interesting to me. It's incredibly sad, but also interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly sad because colleges and universities, tuition is out of control. And I've read different articles, and people say, well, it's because with the last Great Recession, people started going back to school more. They wanted those skills to be able to compete within the job market and so forth. And so these schools were seeing an uptick in their enrollment. So they started building new buildings and new amenities and, to attract all of these students and so forth. And it just kind of snowballed, right? Yeah. So now it costs so much money to go to college even. How is a teacher going to spend, $40,000, $50,000 a year, have all of this debt, come out, and then go teach for $25,000 or $30,000 a year?
Yeah,
it's not possible, right? So what we're doing is we're hindering our society, itself by not helping or encouraging, and I know that there's a huge debate that goes on between free schooling and, how much schools should cost and all of that sort of thing. But I'm looking at it from practicality, right? I'm looking at it from a logical perspective of, if you make it impossible for teachers to teach, they won't teach. Therefore, the next generation won't have the same education.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see that with a lot of what we expect teachers to be. As I said before, you have to, at this stage, really be like intrinsically motivated to be a teacher, because you're not getting a lot of outside motivation to do that. And so in some level, that's who you want teaching. But the reality is you're also going to get, and I don't mean this in any offense to any direct teacher or anything like that, I'm just talking about economics here. There's a reason they pay what they pay for different positions, either because they can or because they need to. And in this situation, it's because they can. And the people who will accept those level of salaries are not always your best and brightest. And that's unfortunate because, again, you have such a ripple effect from teachers.
Yeah, I think that the result is that where those who have to be very, very dedicated to teaching. But, I don't think that it is, let's get someone who is less than qualified, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And I don't think that they're all teachers out there go into teaching because they can't do anything else. I believe
Absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
that's a myth and a misnomer.
No, I'd say it's a
Right.
minority probably.
Right. There are some, we call them tenure jockeys.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, there are some out there, but for the most part, it's because people want to make change. And the
Hmm.
reason that they can't get paid is because they don't have the money.
Yep.
They don't have the money from, government or what have you. And so, at some point, it's going to be that we only have rich people who can pay for college that come out and teach. So we're, exacerbating this class system.
Hmm. And I think that's a lot of the things that we do is it goes back to creating a class system and then pretending if as a class system has to be created. No, we're making choices that make that an outcome. It's not a naturally existing thing that there's always going to be some form of a class system based upon wealth. There will be some form of a class system, I'm sure, but that's generally speaking by achievement, not by wealth. And right now, what we're doing is creating one by wealth, which is also hampering it because, as you said, it perpetuates itself because when rich people are the only ones who can afford to be teachers, they're not going to go and then teach at an inner city school unless they, again, have an intrinsic motivator to. A lot of them will end up teaching at private schools and making good money, and it just the rich get richer while the poor get poorer.
Right. And actually, we already have run into, a teacher crisis in our country, and it's going to get worse
Mm-hmm.
because, with college and universities becoming even more expensive than they were, then we don't have a generation of teachers coming behind. So
Mm-hmm.
the crunch that we have is going to get a lot worse real quick. We also have growing numbers of people, right? The population is growing. And because of that, we're going to have all of these kids and we're not going to have anybody to teach them. And we got to do something about it.
And that's the thing. I think we're living in a very interesting time. We have been for quite some time where we are starting to see a necessary paradigm shift in the way that we live. We have to, because the rules that we've been living by for the majority of our time no longer make sense. And they continue to change in ways that are untenable and make it so only a certain level of people, wealth wise, can continue to live by the old means. So if your system is leaving that many people behind, you have a broken system that needs to be reevaluated. And I don't know what that is. I'm not going to say that I have an idea of that how to fix that, whether it's free college, lowering the price of college, subsidized college, whatever it is. There's a solution. I just don't know which one it is. But I do think you have to start going down that road because America already has a reputation in the world for being kind of gleefully ignorant, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
say that in the most
Mm-hmm.
polite way possible. If we
Okay.
continue down the path of making education an untenable goal for so many people, we are going to make that so much more true that it's going to become ridiculous. And we're going to lose our position in the world because all these other countries aren't necessarily doing that. They're getting more and more educated populaces while we get a less educated populace. And we just need to kind of be purposeful about how we fix that.
Yeah, actually, we already are losing our stance within the world in terms of education, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been falling on lists. I think a couple of years ago we bumped up a little bit, but for the most part, it's been a steady decline in where we rank in terms of education. And there are countries around the world that their focus is on education a lot more than the U.S. Some countries actually do implement debate across the curriculum. Not to try to plug it or anything, but it has been effective. In Ireland and there's one other country, but we have to find other ways, right? So we can't just say the system's broken, tear it all down. We can't do that, but we
Mm-hmm.
also can't say hide our head in the sand and say, well, it's worked this far, let's just continue on. We have
Mm-hmm.
to make tweaks at it. We have to tweak the system in order to dial it in so that it meets our goals, but at the same time is a system that's tenable. And right now we haven't found that sweet spot.
When I think it goes back to what we kind of talked about earlier, the fallacy of believing that essentially if it isn't broken, don't fix it. And that's not how you get better. You need to be constantly tweaking, as you said, because if we're waiting for the system to break, the impact of that break is going to be so monumental. We need to make sure that we're managing it and fixing our position in the educational balance. Because one of the things I've heard people say, and I think it's foolish position. I don't think it makes sense. Is that, well, if we're so bad in education, why do people come over here for Harvard and stuff like that? That's because we have such a high class at the very top, but our average is so bad. They can't.
Right.
Those people can't pull us up.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the alarm has been sounding for years, and people haven't recognized it. Right? We've seen all of the the protests and the picketing from teachers in Oklahoma, California, all over the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
There are teachers in Oklahoma that are making $25,000 a year, which is barely above minimum wage. And I know that what a lot of people say is, well, they get 3 months off.
That's
But
stupid.
what they don't realize is that one, teachers actually, a lot of them do teach summer school.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition, a lot of them are actually preparing during the summer on their own unpaid time so that they can be successful the next year and so that their kids can be successful.
But,
Right. So even in college, right? So I've been teaching at Prairie View for a couple of years, and at Wiley I was more of in the administration, so it was like I worked 12 months. But at PV I've been teaching, so it was like, oh, okay, summer, cool. But when you turn in your grades, it's like then you've got to do trainings, and then you got to work on what's going to happen for next year, and then right before school starts you have more trainings and meetings and conferences and all of these other things. There is so much going on that you don't get paid for,
mm-hmm.
but you have to do it if you want to be good at what you do. So you have millions of people who are volunteering their time and not getting anything from it. And that's why you've been seeing the picketing. It's like, recognize us. Even in the pandemic, people have been saying, wow, these teachers, we finally realize what they've been talking about. And it's like, okay, cool. Now let's do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's figure out a way. And I'm hoping that this has really shined a light on the education system as a whole, that, we've got to make these tweaks, right? And if we don't, it's at our own peril.
And so I just wanted to, before I touch on that point you were making there, I just wanted to say why I said that was stupid. So you get 3 months off. Let's just play it at face value for a second. You get 3 months off, and because of that, you deserve to make $25,000. If they work those 3 months, that's roughly $5,000 extra. So they're making 30. That's not worth it. You're not even barely making, what is that, $1,500 a month across those 3 months or whatever. That's nonsense. Okay, so that's why I say that's a stupid position to take. Basic math will tell you that's a terrible position to take on that.
Right. They're still making minimum wage. They're just making it a little longer.
Yeah, exactly. You have to work more for it. It's just nonsense. But to go where I think you were going there, that is one of the things I'm the most hopeful about what 2020 was. A lot of 2020 was really bad for a lot of people. But because of the way we are as human beings, or maybe just the way we are as Americans, I don't want to put the entire world in this because I don't know it that well. We need to face those pains before we change. Like going back to what I said before about it being broken before you fix it. Well, now you see it's broken. Now you're recognizing that these systems are broken. How do we fix it? How do we move forward? And I'm hopeful that that is going to be the outcome for what we've seen. It's like, oh, teachers deserve a lot more money, because living at home with my own child and trying to make them learn has almost killed me. And these people are doing it for minimum wage, essentially. So you're telling everybody out there that, hey, McDonald's employees or whoever else don't deserve to make $15 an hour. I don't agree with that, but let's say I did. Let's say that's fine. But the teachers do, right? Because look at what they're doing. If you're telling me that McDonald's employees too so low that they don't deserve $15, you can, I hope, agree that these teachers do at least, and they're barely making that.
Yeah. And let's look at it from a different perspective, right? Since we've talked about debate and talked about perspectives and being able to see things from multiple perspectives, but let's look at it from another perspective. And that is that, we talk about paying teachers more, and most people say we can't do that, we don't have the money. But what we're not doing is looking at it as an investment, right? Because if we invest in these students, if we invest and find a different way so that we're more effective, right? So that they learn more skills, so that they earn more money, that means more tax revenue. That means then we can pay for what it is that we're doing, right? But we have to be able and willing to invest that money in order to reap that reward and that return on the investment.
And the unfortunate part of what you're saying there is that Americans, I should say, are terrible at investing. They're so bad at it. That's why the American net worth is so low. Well, one of the many reasons. I don't want to pin it just on that. But so we are so bad at short-term solutions instead of long-term solutions. And that's what you're talking about, is investing in a specific education, so that way we can get all these reap the rewards for it later down the line. But we can't see 5 feet in front of our face, and so we don't know that. But I always say, if you give me a budget, and I show you where the money's going, I show you what you're prioritizing. And what you're not prioritizing, the education, which means you're not prioritizing the future, which means you're not prioritizing our place in the world and getting better at it, and all these type of things. And I think that's one of the things we have to really shake, is that culture clash of gleefully ignorant Americans, and then also where we put our money and where we subsidize, like I said, our future based upon that. Because you're still doing it, you're just making a bad choice with it.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, when you talk about, you know, Americans being bad at investing, you know, if we taught, you know, investment classes, if we taught financial literacy in school, which is something that we don't, you know, we think, oh, you know, we'll give them math and that's good enough. No, we got to teach them to invest for themselves so that they'll make, you know, smart decisions for long term. You know, Social Security is in a perilous position right now, right? Mm-hmm. Medicare, Medicaid, all of that. If we're not careful and we don't invest for ourselves, you know, when we retire, we're not going to have anything there. You know, my mom, bless her heart, loved her. She passed away.
Sorry.
She passed away. Thank you. She passed away of cancer, and rather young. But she hadn't saved anything. You know, she had nothing. And she was only 61 when she passed. So what happened is she couldn't get Social Security. She couldn't get Medicare, Medicaid. You know, her income was in that nebulous area. So, you know, there was no help for her. Mm-hmm. And I fear that, you know, if individuals don't have this financial literacy, that they're going to be in a similar position, especially if Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security end up falling, right? Mm-hmm. If they fall all together and collapse, then what are we going to do, you know, as individuals who are getting ready for retirement, but we haven't planned for it? So it's a really, really serious fear for millions of Americans.
Well, and I think this goes back to a lot of the topics we've talked. This is going to tie them all kind of together. I think a lot of people's value is inextricably linked to their ability to be better off than someone else. And so we consistently have these systems in our society that require people to die or require people to be poor. There's no way for all of us to succeed in the current systems. And we somehow not only are okay with that, we cherish that, because then when we don't die, when we don't fail in retirement or everything like that, we then can look morally down on other people and say, you should have done what I did and you wouldn't be in the situation you're in. And so that's I think part of why we are not able to build those systems, because financially we have the money. We're just choosing not to. So every day we make a choice to make a society where people have to die, live on the streets, do whatever else it is for the system to function. And that's pretty messed up. And then, like you said, in the cases of people like your mother, we're just essentially saying those are the costs of other people being successful. We have to have the system. Right. We have to have, unfortunately, people dying early and things like that, or not able to get the care they were. Healthcare needs to be a privilege that you can afford and everything. And if you don't make enough money, then you have to die from whatever ailment you got. And that's nonsense. Again, it doesn't make sense.
You know, in debate, we have a thing that's called the horns of a false dilemma.
Okay.
And basically what it is that there are two choices, and, you know, we present that as our only choices. So a lot of people think that the choices are that, you know, they pull themselves up from their bootstraps, or the government takes care of them and puts them on welfare forever, right? And there are more choices than that. Mm-hmm. As the executive director of a nonprofit organization, I must admit that I was a victim of this, right?
Yes.
So we've gotten a lot of our funding, you know, from different foundations and so forth. And, you know, when COVID hit, you know, the foundation says, we love you. You're doing amazing work. We want to continue to fund you, but we can't at the moment because of COVID. We have to reprioritize. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, how am I going to help all these kids, right? And at that moment, I had to make a fundamental shift in my thinking. I was thinking as a charity, not as a nonprofit organization, right? Mm-hmm. So charity, a lot of times, and I'm not trying to downplay charities or knock them or anything, but a lot of people who work or lead nonprofit organizations have that charity mindset. Mm-hmm. Grants will come in, you know, everyone is supportive of the mission, but we have to fundamentally shift our ideology from that charity mindset to social entrepreneurs, mm-hmm. right? We have to put things in place so that we have revenue coming in to make sure that our mission is being successful. And that was a really wild shift for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been actually working with, different organizations and entities about debate across the curriculum, in order to create this social entrepreneur mindset so that I can then help to bring in revenue, for the organization. I'm actually working with a lot of individuals on leadership. It's like, you know what, I've got a PhD in leadership. Let me go help some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm creating a course on leadership, in order to help people, whether they be running nonprofits or other organizations and so forth. And so all of that is geared towards bringing in a revenue stream to help my mission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long story, but the reason is because I think that other individuals think of retirement as you have two fundamental choices. You either fund it on your own, or, the government will take care of you and there's no in between.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not enough of us are finding the middle ground, right? And looking at other opportunities or other things that we can do with our skills in order to bring in, different types of revenue streams, so that we don't then have only those two choices, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of where, going back to what I was saying before about capitalism, communism, socialism, whatever the ism is, we have to have hybrids. And the situation
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about is a hybrid solution. And I believe that to be true for the majority of cases that we have in the world, particularly when it comes to finances, because it shouldn't be, like you said, you're either completely subsisting off of government assistance or you're making it on your own. There should be a hybrid system that allows people in this country to just live. You know what I mean? And I'm not sponsoring any particular solution to that, because my motto
Right.
is always research first, then try to implement a solution, and then monitor it. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what we should be doing, no matter what the solution is. I don't care if you say it's UBI, if you say that it's this, it's that, whatever it is.
Right.
Sorry, universal basic income, for those who weren't aware what UBI is. That's the thing. I don't think has to be as drastic as what you're talking about, either completely subsisting off the government or living completely on your own. There are some happy mediums that we need to continue to work towards. And there's a lot of people in the financial, what they call the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early community,
Right.
who build into their calculations, which include investments, real estate, all these different types of things. They build Social Security into it. They have it as
Yeah.
part of their calculation of what they're going to do, because they know, one, Social Security isn't enough, but why am I going to get rid of money that I am entitled to, that I paid into for the entirety of my working career? Why would I not take advantage of that?
Well, in the not too distant future, it may not be their choice to get rid of it. The system may collapse if
Oh
we're
yeah.
not careful,
Oh yeah.
So we have to be really, really careful of that. And I fear that so many people are not investing in themselves and investing in their future, that they're putting themselves in some pretty serious peril, like my mom.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's disappointing that happens to so many people, but it happens to so many people. We can't pretend like it's an anomaly. That is our majority. It's not even a minority of the population. The majority of the population cannot even cover like a couple $1,000 problem that pops up, let alone not working for the rest of their lives. So that's why you see so many people working in their 70s and 80s these days. You're seeing a lot more people having to do that because they simply have to have some kind of income to survive. And that's just, again, if you want to work, that's an awesome thing. But if you have to work at that age, then it's kind of a little bit more sad. And I think our system, again, is just not built the right way. We continue to just carry things forward.
But there are more choices now, right?
True.
COVID shined a light, and what it actually did was give us choices for a post-COVID world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now there are so many more opportunities where people can work from home. Not all of those opportunities are going to go away. So those individuals who are retiring can utilize the skills that they've built for decades and utilize them in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to utilize them even working from home, where they actually can give back and end up making some more money for themselves, so that their retirement isn't as bleak as it might be.
Absolutely. And to your point, I'm coming up on working about 18 months now remote. I work from home.
Right.
I do work remotely. And what's interesting is my company has looked at the situation. They've made that determination that, hey, we don't need to bring all these people back in the office now that COVID's kind of, our profitability's up. We can cancel some of our leases. They realize that that's a path forward. But there's a lot of companies who still want to carry the old paradigm forward. And they're like, no, you have to come in the office. This is the only way the work happens. You're not going to work from home. We know you're going to watch YouTube all day and not get your job done and stuff like that. So I agree with you. I'm hopeful that the COVID has made that necessary Band-Aid ripoff that we needed to really start that process of change, whether it's, again, racial equality, whether it's the teaching, whether it's upping the remote possibility for work. I think a lot of those things bring a lot of value, because then what you start doing is you start making people able to make more choices. Maybe I can work remotely for Google and not move to Silicon Valley, where making $200,000 makes me feel like I make 50. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, those are the type of things you can do now, and it gives you a lot more flexibility. It makes the world a lot more of an interesting place, I think, in a lot of ways. And then hopefully education becomes part of that as well. You know, I got all of my degrees from going to school online, which, again, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, isn't even heard of. Now it's pretty much the norm. A lot of people do that. So and that's what I told you before. I didn't have a traditional college experience, because I never went. Well, that's not true. I stayed in the dorms for all of like 3 months when I originally graduated high school. So I did have some of the initial college experience. But anyways, but the point is, so more and more people.
Well, mine wasn't traditional either. Mine wasn't traditional either. So my undergraduate, I actually, went to campus. I was at Long Beach State in California, but I was an older student. Right. Because I went back to school. So I was like, I don't know, 25, 26. And I did my first semester in the dorm. And I'm like, oh my God, these kids are young. let me get the hell out of here. But, it took me 9 years to get my bachelor's degree. But after the bachelor's degree, my master's and my PhD, I actually did online. I did them through, state institutions, or, one was state and, one was private, but it wasn't, you got to be careful, right? So there's an online revolution in terms of education, but you have to be careful of the sources that you choose for that education.
Oh yeah.
Right. The for-profit may be out of fashion, but the for-profit mindset still exists, and you have to be careful to whom you subscribe to get your, this education and this learning.
And I'm glad you said that, because I can tell my own story, which is completely shows that. So I went to undergrad to a for-profit university. I'll say the names because I'm not ashamed of any of my past. Ashford University. I went to Ashford University, which is for-profit. And right around the time I was about to get my degree, they almost lost their accreditation because of the way they were doing business, because of all the different types of things, which is a danger. But then I got my master's from Northeastern University, a way better school, a school that's not going to lose its accreditation anytime soon and everything like that, and much more established and everything. So to your point, they're not all created equal, and you do need to choose effectively. I know that Ashford, I think, has since maybe corrected the ship a little bit, but I still can't say I recommend them. I did it because I needed to bump out a bachelor's degree, and I knew that my bachelor's degree was a block check. I didn't need to learn a thing to do what I needed to do.
But it's also such a change, right? And COVID has created that change. So you got the rise of Udemy and, all these online courses, and people are Skillshare and, all this kind of thing, where they're not necessarily experts in what it is that they're teaching, that they're just trying to earn some money because they don't have to be accredited. They don't have to be certified. They don't have to be all this. So, they're learning these skills almost as you are, So you got to be careful of where you get your education from. And I'm not saying that in terms of the school. I'm saying in terms of the individual teaching it. Oh yeah,
and then, so to your point, you or I, well, you would actually be relatively accredited as an expert, so that maybe you're not the best example. But I could go start a Udemy course right now. Udemy courses are not specifically ran by people who know what they're talking about. Let's just say it that way. But that doesn't mean that all of them have no value. It just means that not every one of them has value. And that's really the rub. You have to be a little bit more discerning. Same thing when you look at a news source or a YouTube video. Just because somebody's on the internet saying something doesn't mean it has value. You still have to be discerning, particularly when you're putting your pocketbook down to pay for a Udemy course or anything like that. So I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. You have to be still a discerning consumer.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the reasons why, as a, someone who runs a nonprofit, I'm in all these Facebook groups for leadership and nonprofits and so forth. And most of the Facebook groups for leadership are like motivational sayings, or someone who's trying to sell you something, trying to sell you on their system, to become rich. And it's like, you know what, there's not a lot of in between. So let me help out some of these nonprofit, owners, leaders, what have you, that are trying to, better themselves and don't know where to go. So I actually started a Facebook group. Actually, I just launched it today. where I can, help answer some questions and actually provide leadership tools, not tips and tricks and that kind of stuff, but actually like application, right? So like mindset is really, really important in leadership and in business and in organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I have this thing that I learned working from one of the largest real estate companies doing their curriculum stuff, and it's called the big why. Why are you doing what you do? And not enough people actually document what their big why is and keep it with them, keep it around them when they're doing their planning. Because you always need to make sure that you understand your goal, but also your motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm doing is I'm having people, it's like, okay, here's a worksheet. Let's figure out our why. Let's put it into place where you're going to keep it at the forefront of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to help, as much as I can, individuals so that they have, good direction, good training, good and develop those leadership skills so they can achieve their mission.
And that's awesome. And I think, again, like I said, somebody with your skill set that needs to be learned so it can be passed on, so we can continue to grow from it. Like I said, to get that exponential growth instead of just you keeping it within yourself,
Yeah. And there's also, individuals suffer from imposter syndrome, where it's like, you don't know if you're good enough, and you have all these self-doubts and that sort of thing. And I'm not sure what perpetuates that in our society. I'm sure we could drill that down a little bit, but it's real. And so I was like, well, there's nothing I can do. It's like, but let me try. And so I'm trying to overcome that imposter syndrome of let me see if I can help. If I can't, that's okay, you're no worse off. So just trying to help.
Absolutely. I think there is definitely merit in just doing the work. The outcome doesn't necessarily need to dictate whether or not it was worthwhile. Just doing the work will be valuable, at least to you, and then you could maybe change some of the ways you teach or you learn something, whatever it is. There's still value in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me more about your nonprofit. What is the nonprofit's name, and what do you do there?
So the nonprofit is the National HBCU Speech and Debate Association, and we build and foster speech and debate programs at HBCUs. When I started it, there were only 5 HBCUs that had speech and debate programs. Now we have, right around 30. And, it's really to promote these skills and skill building for students at HBCUs. Our national championship is actually coming up. This is our 4th year of our national championship, and that's coming up in February 27th and 28th. Yeah, and I think that it's getting some momentum. I think that, it's been something that's been really, really productive.
Well, that's awesome. I definitely think it's a high value one because, as we talked about before, debate skills can fix so many different things. And I think, again, being biased here, I do think that has a lot of value in the HBCU world because of some of the stigmas that are around Black people being argumentative or, opinionated or whatever else stuff. So teaching them those debate skills and how to manage those things, I think it's already going to make them that populace a bit better at managing those expectations the world already is forcing upon them.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I think it's going to, public speaking and argumentation is one of the biggest fears, right? Mm-hmm. And if we can take away some of those fears from some of these students at HBCUs, they're getting quality education, they're motivated, oh my goodness, they are the best and the brightest, and there's going to be nothing stopping them, so I'm really excited.
Absolutely. So when I first was reaching out to you to try to see if you wanted to come on the podcast, one of the things that obviously, and I'll be honest here, as a mid-30s Black man, Denzel Washington is very important to my life. So a lot of things that I see that involve Denzel Washington, I'm immediately more attracted to.
Right.
And lo and behold, there's a photo of you there with Denzel Washington. So tell me how that came about and what your kind of relationship with Denzel. Yeah. I think it involved mostly the great debaters, I imagine, but maybe your best friends.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
No. I wish Denzel was my best friend. No, we've actually, I've done a lot of work with Denzel Washington and with Nate Parker, who were both in the movie The Great Debaters. Mm-hmm. And actually, the Nate Parker Foundation is a big supporter of the National HBCU Speech and Debate Association. They actually have, they teach students to express themselves through film. And so they've taught a lot of students, filmmaking, and they've actually done a lot of our films. If you go onto YouTube, you can check out, videos that are about our organization, and those were done by the Nate Parker students. So that's been awesome. But, when I started at Wiley, it was a couple of years after they had restarted the team. And it had been a long time, and Mr. Washington had never visited Wiley. So we were going off in 2014 to our first national championship, and it's actually the first one that we won. But as a surprise, the administration set up a call. We had a big going away thing, in the chapel, because it's a Methodist school. And the administration had set up a call with Denzel Washington. And, the kids were really excited. One of my students, who was, the vice president at the time, I believe, got onto the call and guilted Denzel Washington. He's like, "Why haven't you come back?" And so Denzel was like, "Where is it again?" Just outside of Shreveport. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to be in Shreveport. Okay, I'll come visit." And so, we had set it up because he was actually filming The Magnificent Seven in Louisiana.
A great movie too.
Yeah, it was a good movie. Which is why he had the lamb chops and, So one of my kids guilted him into coming. That was, and that's when my student performed for him and all of that sort of thing. And it was actually a magnificent day because we got to spend basically a day with him, where he saw what we were doing. He was so excited. He was taking pictures of all of our trophies. And, we did a presentation as to, the success that we've had, because that team would not have restarted without his donation. He gave $1 million to restart that team. So, we're talking all these championships, and my students won all these awards and all of that. And he was excited, and he wanted to go share it with people. So, it created that enthusiasm. So it was absolutely awesome. One of my students, I think I mentioned it, performed for him and made him cry, and that was a pretty significant moment, so we're really excited. Second time was our first HBCU Nationals. This was even before we were our own 501c3, our own organization. I started it at Wiley. And so we had invited him and said, "Look, this is what your vision and what your donation is developing into. We're helping all of these schools." So he came and was at the award ceremony, and we inducted him into our Hall of Fame, and he was such an inspiration for so many students. It was exciting.
No, that's outstanding. And it's always cool because, people like Denzel Washington or anybody who's like at that level of not only fame, but reverence, you worry when you hear stories about them every once in a while, because you're like, are they actually going to be a good person? And obviously all the stories about Denzel Washington is that he's exactly what you would imagine him to be, which is just loving and giving and very warm and open and everything like that. So I'm very excited to hear somebody who has direct contact with the man say the same thing.
It's funny because, with the phone call and the couple of times that I've met him and I've talked to him a few times, and it's so funny because every time I talk to him, he always tells the same story. And it is about the woman who told him in a beauty salon that, he was going to make an impact on, society. And then he talks about the U-Haul and the hearse. I don't know if you've ever seen him speak, but he always talks about there's never a U-Haul behind a hearse. So, you can't take it with you, that sort of thing. And it's so funny because I always hear him tell that story, and I think it's because he believes it. And it's not because he's just trying to think of something to say. It's almost like he's evangelizing that. So yeah, it's always been an amazing experience to talk to him.
Well, and I can say that those who may listen to me talk frequently, I may say the same thing over and over again. It's because, one, that's how I internalize data. That's how I tell myself to do what I need to do and keep myself focused, is those kind of stories. I keep them the same. It's not that I'm creating new ones all the time or whatever. And then secondary to that, like you said, you always try to impart some type of wisdom upon people. And when you do, you need to have a reference point. You're going to go back to the same one. Again, I'm not going to keep creating stories to try to help out and tell people different things. So I take that as that means it's worthwhile because, like you said, he's polished it. He's told it a bunch of times. But I do love
Yeah.
when people do that. You meet somebody like a couple of times and maybe they don't remember meeting you, maybe they don't remember what story they told you. We may have a grandparent or somebody like that we know who does that, and they tell you the same story and you're like, I've heard this.
Yeah, it's funny because I always think that, and it's like, maybe it's that, but no, in actuality, it's because he believes in it so much, and that he is trying to make sure that he imparts that wisdom onto everyone that he talks to, about basically doing your very best, but give back, and I think it's a really important message, and I share that.
And exactly. And just to, again, bring things full circle, when you're talking about before, Chadwick Boseman, HBCU, and who paid for his school? Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington, right?
So that is the way he gives back. And then so everything that, and again, not saying do this before an ego play or any kind of like self-fulfillment, but everything that Chadwick Boseman did in his life was somewhat a direct result of what Denzel Washington gave him. And whatever your students do, anybody who goes through your program or your 501c3, anybody who does that on some level has been directly affected by Denzel Washington. And so when he's talking about give back, you give back in the ways that really have impact. Because he could have taken that $1 million, given it to Red Cross, somebody else. And I'm not saying that has no value.
Right.
But the ripple effect of each thing you do can affect people in different ways. And I think there's a lot of value in the way that he chose to give that specific amount of money and his time, if nothing else.
Yeah. And I think that everyone needs to, pay attention to that lesson. And I hope that, they'll start to give back as well, in whatever that is. I'm trying to give back, to a lot of, business or organizational owners and, nonprofits, just by teaching them some leadership skills, so I think that everyone needs to give back.
And I agree with that. And I think it's actually, like I said, somebody with your experience and everything like that, giving back just has so much impact. And so, again, thank you for what you do day in and day out. Thank you for coming on here and sharing it with people. And I definitely want to put some links to your 501c3, so maybe we can get some donations and those type of things, because I think you're doing great work. And let's hope that next time we talk that you've gotten that from 30 to 105. Let's get it all the way up, every HBCU with a debate.
We'd love it. We're going to get there.
So you can have people like myself who can see them, hopefully when they're younger, maybe change the entire course of their life. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, these kids are going to change the world. I'm so excited. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, and, keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. But with that, I'll let you go, because I know we've been talking already for 90 minutes, and eventually we're going to get into a debate, and I don't think I'm equipped for that.
Defense only.
Yeah, exactly. So,
all right, my friend. Have a good one.
You too. Take care. Thanks for checking out Starting Nowhere. Make sure that you follow us on Facebook so you can interact with us and talk about this episode and others.